Today's feature is The Boogeyman, which was released June 2nd by director Rob Savage, starring Sophie Thatcher, Chris Messina, and Vivian Lyra Blair. And this, my friends, was my jam. This is just corny enough to sit in my wheelhouse. I love this kind of a thing. It was super Halloween. It was the movie that you're going to rent for your slumber party. So it felt like nostalgic for me, even though it was new for me. I really, really enjoyed it. The movie starts really creepy. The movie's dark the whole way through. And at times it does become a little problematic because it's difficult to see what's going on, but it works very well in the beginning, that sort of not knowing what's going on, just like the beginning of Jaws, where things are sort of hidden and you're not seeing them. That's how the boogeyman begins. And then we find out that we are observing a family. The father is a psychiatrist, and he has two daughters, Sadie, who is a teenager, and Sawyer, who is a young girl. She looks like she's in elementary school. And guess what, folks? Mom died in a car accident, because parents always die in a car accident. They have to die in a car accident. Anyway, Dad is a therapist. Again, the entire house is super dark. Even his room where he meets with his patients is incredibly dark, which I found a little strange. Usually therapists would have some sort of lamp or light going on in their room, but it's even dark in his room. And one day, shortly after his wife dies, a man named Lester Billings shows up unannounced, no appointment, saying he needs to see someone because it's believed that he killed his children. But he knows he didn't do it. He obviously knows he didn't do it. And he knows that it was sort of this shadow monster. And when pushed a little bit to find out more about the shadow monster, he says it's a thing that comes for your kids when you're not paying attention. The therapist doesn't really make the connection, but the audience does. In that, like the cobbler's kids go shoeless, he is not listening to his children when they want to speak to him. He instead says, "Oh, aren't you seeing your therapist? You should talk to her about this." And the therapist is lovely, but also kind of creepy. And when they are seeing the therapist, she's trying to do exposure therapy with Sawyer, with the younger one, who's afraid of the dark. And her fear of the dark allows for some really cool cuts and filming, because she has these lights in her room and she'll drop them under the bed and kind of like look under the bed, and the camera flips around and you've got these weird shadows. It's really nicely done. Another nice theme threading through is this idea of roots and letting go. We see roots in Sawyer has a loose tooth that is not coming out. And Sadie even says to her, "Mom always said we all have deep roots in this family. We don't know how to let things go." But then when the boogeyman's around, you see these sort of roots, like tree roots, going through the home. Again, with this idea of letting go of the grief. And Sadie wisely says, "I don't want to let go." And that feels very normal and natural. When you experience that kind of a loss, you're afraid to let it go. You're afraid you won't have that closeness with that person anymore if you move on. So that was really handled very realistically. Again, the darkness played well into the film, because when we actually do see the boogeyman, it looks good. The creature looks good because it is so dark you can't really pick it apart and see too much. But there were times when I really would have wanted to have seen a little more, because I felt there were things in the monster that I should have been taking note of, but that I wasn't able to do because of the darkness. But then at the same time, we have this issue with like Sawyer being afraid of the dark, but she's playing her PlayStation in the dark. And I know that the TV, when you're playing a game, there's lights from the game, but I also know that the lights from the game go in and out. So I would think that someone who is afraid of the dark would have their lights on. And if you're dealing with a boogeyman, we all learned by age 4. If there's a monster in your closet or a boogeyman under the bed, what do? You turn on the lights. Like, we know that. So it did seem a little funny at times that these people were walking around in this dark house. The only other sort of drawback I felt for the movie, or where I started to lose interest, was with Sadie's United Friends of Benetton clique. And we were supposed to not like them. The one girl in particular, Nat, is just nasty. She's just a nasty girl. And we were supposed to feel that, but I sort of felt like I got pulled out of the tension a little bit when I was focusing on these mean girls, and I didn't want to be there. But otherwise, I thought it was a great film. I thought it was so much fun. My next slumber party pick is going to be The Boogeyman. Sidebar for today. I know this was a film, but I'm getting a little tired of all the psychiatrists with home offices. Therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, please do not have home offices. Please have boundaries between yourself and your patient. Having your patients coming into your home is problematic for many reasons. I know it feels kind of like fun. Like when we were growing up and we saw The Cosby Show and he had his office in his house, it was like, that's great. That's cool. He never has to leave his house. His snacks are right there. His goofy sweaters are right there. Like, that's really cool. But now as adults, we can look back and say that's not a great idea, especially for mental health counselors, to have these people know where you live, to have them in your home, perhaps accidentally seeing your children or your spouse or your dog or your cat or whatever. I'm in no way trying to imply that people who seek therapy are dangerous people. They are not. The vast majority of people seeking therapy are trying to better themselves. And I will always cheer on people who are trying to better themselves. Keep working, keep doing, keep striving. That's awesome. Take your swings. But we also know that many people develop fantasy ideas about their therapists. They think they're in love with their therapists. They think there's a connection between themselves and their therapist, and they have to sort of work through that and realize it's not real, but it is a common thing. So again, you don't want people knowing where you live. Please remember what happened to poor Steve Carroll in The Patient when that Gleason boy found his house. And I love that Gleason boy. Well, I did. Now I'm terrified of him. But look what happened to Steve Carroll. Do you want that to happen to you? Rent an office.